Good morning and welcome to this special board meeting of the Durham District School Board on Monday, June 27th. I will begin with the acknowledgement of the land that we're on. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Thank you. I'm presiding over the meeting currently because both the chair and vice chair were unable to attend this special board meeting. And so the first order of business will be determined by a majority vote who will be the presiding officer and chair the meeting. And so I would ask if there are any self-nominations or nominations for a chair of the meeting, please.
Am I allowed to participate in this?
I will ask Council Cotter for his advice in terms of that question. Thank you, Trustee Crawford.
I want to pull up the section. Just give me 1 minute, please. Yes, in my view, Trustee Crawford can participate in selection of the presiding member.
Thank you for that question, Trustee Crawford.
Well, if I may then, before I nominate anyone, this is a hearing. In my opinion, I believe a hearing, it should contain the board members only, not staff.
Trustee Crawford, this is a public board meeting.
I realize it's a public board meeting, but whether it's in public or not, it's a hearing. I just want this on the record. I'm not trying to be difficult because in the first place, we have people who would be voting in this who are not here now. Are they going to participate in the vote?
I think
voting?
If I may, I think these questions are better addressed once we have a presiding officer. There's nobody who can control the floor and control the questions. So I think the first order of business.
Well, then I would. What would be the ordinary process? Chair, vice chair, and then secretary. Also.
The director has outlined the process, which is for the members to come to order and to vote by majority resolution on a presiding officer. That's the process that the director has outlined.
In that case, I nominate Michael Barrett.
Thank you for that nomination, Trustee Crawford. Trustee Barrett, do you accept that nomination? Thank you. So Trustee Barrett does not accept that nomination. Are there any other nominations? Thank you. Trustee Brainy.
Is this on? Okay. Director Marsh, I think it's a proper protocol. Trustee Templeton is our standing committee vice chair, and I would nominate Scott if he's willing to. I think he did signify that he'd be willing to step in and chair the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Brainy. Trustee Templeton, do you accept that nomination?
I do accept it.
Thank you for the acceptance. Before we call that question, I'll ask if there are any other nominations. Trustee Lundquist?
Thank you. I don't have a nomination. I have a question, which is, can this be done remotely, or do we need somebody in the room? And I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. We will certainly facilitate a virtual chair if that's what happens. Are there any other nominations around the floor? So not seeing any nominations, then I would say that Trustee Templeton, you are acclaimed as chair for the presiding of this meeting. I would ask Chair Templeton if it's possible for you to call a 5-minute recess just so that we can actually brief you on how you can manage the chairing virtually, given that there is some logistics involved in that.
As Director Marsh just mentioned, I'd like to call a 5-minute recess. Welcome back to the meeting, everyone. Are there any declarations of interest? Hearing none, could I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda? Darlene, Trustee Forbes, seconded by Trustee Lundquist. There are no information items, which means we're going to move directly to the recommended actions. Give me 1 second. We received a report from the Integrity Commissioner dated June 6, 2022. That IC report sets out findings that Trustee Crawford breached the board's code of conduct in 3 separate instances. Firstly, A, as a result of comments he made at the October 25th, 2021 Governance Committee meeting, the text of those comments is set out at page 17 of the report. Secondly, B, as a result of comments he made at the January 24th, 2022 Governance Committee meeting, the text of those comments is set out at page 18 of the report. Thirdly, as a result of threats of reprisal against trustees that filed complaints against him. As far as sanctions are concerned, the Integrity Commissioner recommends that the Board of Trustees censure Trustee Crawford. Having received the report from the Integrity Commissioner, the Board of Trustees must now make its own assessment of whether a breach or breaches of the Code of Conduct have occurred, and if so, the appropriate sanction or sanctions. I would like us to consider each alleged breach separately, and then if the Board determines that there has been one or more breach, we would move on to consider the issue of sanction or sanctions. In accordance with the provisions of the Education Act, Trustee Crawford is entitled to be present at this meeting, but may not vote. He is entitled to speak to a motion, as are each of the trustees. I remind trustees that under section 5.12.5 of our consolidated bylaws, each member may speak up to twice on any motion, up to 4 minutes the first time and up to 2 minutes the second time. We have not yet had the need to enforce that section since it came into force, as comments have been fairly short. But I'll be keeping an eye on the time and will limit members' time if need be. As Trustee Crawford is not entitled to vote on the motion, I don't think it makes sense for him to move the motions. I think Nikki or Darlene should be given that chance to move the motions. You should, and at this point, what I would like to do is, if possible, I would like to see if there is a motion that would deal with number C first. That's the thirdly, as a result of threats of reprisal against the trustees who filed complaints against him. Is there anybody that would like to move a motion on that statement?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I couldn't quite, I didn't catch all of that. Could you repeat that, and would that be something that I could?
What we're going to do is we're going to jump down to C, which is the third one, as a result of threats of reprisal against the trustees that filed complaints against you. What I'm looking for is a motion, and yourself can't put forward the motion, but I'm looking for a motion from any other trustee on the floor.
Trustee Lundquist's hand is up. I'm not sure if you saw that in the chat, Chair Templeton.
Oh, I see it now.
Thank you. Respectfully, Chair Templeton, I'm not sure it makes sense to me to start with that, so I'm going to read 3 motions that I have here prepared, and they can be dealt with separately, I imagine. So the first would be, as a result of the comments made at the October 25th, 2021 Governance Committee meeting, the text of which is set out at page 17 of the IC report, Trustee Crawford breached the code of conduct, and in particular, section 1.4 and 6.9. The second motion that I would bring is as a result of comments that he made at the January 24th, 2022 Governance Committee meeting, the text of which is set out at page 18 of the IC report. Trustee Crawford breached the code of conduct, and in particular, sections 1.4 and 6.9. And the final motion I would like to raise is, as a result of threats of reprisal against the trustees that filed the complaints against Trustee Crawford, against him, Trustee Crawford breached the code of conduct, and in particular, section 6.53.
Trustee Templeton, would it be helpful if we put motions up one by one in writing on the screen?
Yeah, that would help immensely.
If you could actually send them to Robert, will it be you putting them up on the screen? If you could please send them to Robert, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Trustee Lundquist.
And I would, I'd like a seconder for those motions. And I see Darlene Forbes' hand. So Darlene Forbes, Trustee Forbes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Templeton. I would second those motions.
What I'd like to ask the trustees at this time, if you'd like to separate the three motions and deal with each motion individually. Since we have a first and a seconder, I believe it might be easier, more transparent if we separate and deal with each motion separately. So if we'd like to start with the first motion presented by Trustee Lundquist. And do we have any speakers to the motion? And I should allow Trustee Lundquist, since she moved the motion the first, to speak.
Chair Templeton, sorry to disrupt the flow. Just want to make sure, because staff is trying to get the motions up on the screen, wanted to make sure you're aware that there appear to be two hands raised currently. I'm not sure if they're speaking to the motion that is now on the floor, but Trustee Crawford and Trustee Brainy both have their hands up.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, I see Trustee Brady on the speakers list, Trustee Forbes, Trustee Crawford. I'd like to move to Trustee Forbes, whose hand was up first.
Thank you, Trustee Templeton. It wasn't easy to make these complaints. I did speak in the meeting about the comments of white supremacy, that I do feel, that the comments were inappropriate and repeatedly made, regardless of what trustees or staff responded to Trustee Crawford's concern about the language. And it really impacted, I heard from people, it impacted people's trust in the board, undermined, confidence in the process that we were engaging during the human rights policy. That was quite an extensive process that we underwent, and an incredibly important one for our staff and students. And the comments were in my opinion, damaging, and that is hence I initiated a complaint, which was investigated, and I really do feel that it's important that the board we've been given this very, large report, which an investigation, and I think it's
Sorry,
important.
can I stop you for 1 second, Darlene?
Yeah.
I just want to clarify something with Patrick Cotter. Is there a procedural, or is there out of order on the procedural question that we're talking about? Because we're talking about the motion and not the whole integrity report, correct?
Well, there's a motion on the floor and it's been seconded. It's got 3 parts. I think unless there's any objection, I think it's fine for the trustees to engage in debate on those. They obviously have to be voted on separately, but they're on the floor. So I think open it for discussion at this point, and then when it comes time to vote, we'll vote on them one at a time.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Trustee Forbes, continue, please.
Not at all. This is a difficult process. It's good to seek clarification. That's all I really have to say. I know this is difficult, and but it's incredibly important in terms of public confidence in our board of trustees that we take this matter incredibly seriously and weigh the evidence in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. On my speakers list next was Trustee Brainy and then Trustee Crawford.
Thank you, Chair Templeton. While the motions will be going to be voted on individually, I would ask that there be a recorded vote for each of those motions when they do proceed.
We can arrange for that, Chair Templeton, through the recording secretary to call the vote. We can do that in the boardroom here.
Thank you, Councillor Cotter. And Trustee Crawford. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm off now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first 2 motions are actually quite similar. I did post a defense for these, and I also put out some information to the trustees, which they've had a chance to look at my notes. But in speaking to these, I only have 2 things to say, is that the items that are used that said that it's claimed that I breached those items are the items that pretty much dictate what we do when we're at board meetings. These 2 items were at a committee meeting. They were given to the board or to the committee to debate and to amend and to have discussion. And that's where I made my remarks, and I made them within that the wording should be amended or removed. I had a perfect right to do that. In fact, I'm supposed to participate in debate. Now, when it happened, there was no point of order made, and no one at that time debated me at that time. After that, no one approached me to say that they thought that this was inappropriate. And after that, no one approached the board to complain about what I had said and asked for the chair or for an intervention. And no one approached even the IC to approach Trustee Crawford to see that if this could be handled. There was 4 or 5 remedies for this, and our code of conduct is set up for the purpose of remedying situations like this long before they become a formal complaint. We also had an informal complaint system that could have been used. Instead, the complainants went directly to the IC, which
Point of order, are we debating the motions at hand, or are we debating the process of utilizing the IC?
we're debating the motion, but I'm trying to explain how we got to this point and what my point of view is.
I've addressed my point of order to the chair.
Point of order. Patrick, Council Cotter, could I get a clarification? We are talking to the motion and which we'd like to hear more on the motion itself.
Yeah, thank you. And through your Chair Templeton, given the trustees Crawford's interests that are at stake, I would be very reluctant to limit his comments. He is discussing generally the topic of the motions. I would allow him to proceed.
Please continue, Paul, or Trustee Crawford.
Thank you, Councillor Cotter, and thank you, Chair. It's just a lead up because I think it's very important that everyone understand that there are several remedies to something like this that could have been put into effect, and it would not have taken 6 months and not be damaging to my health, if I can throw that in. And this could have been handled quite quickly. And in my opinion, once the IC took over, he also could have suggested those remedies or even put them into effect. So I'm saying this in my defense. And as to the actual wording in those items, again, they are wordings that we are supposed to adhere to during a regular meeting. This was not a regular meeting. We were in fact trying to develop a policy, and we were amending that policy. So those rules as written would not apply to this. And that also,
I'd like to interrupt.
we also have to keep in
Trustee Crawford, you're at 4 minutes.
Fine. Thank you. And I'll stop there. I think I've said my piece, and it's the number 3 one that I'm far more interested in.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Next speaker on the list is Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. I want to observe that a complainant has a right to select the process that they choose. And the fact that I chose to file this complaint via the IC was because I thought that's where there would be a potential reasonable remedy. And that's entirely my right, and there is nothing improper about doing so. And the suggestion that I am required to go to somebody who is making these comments in a public sphere to confront them directly is not accurate. I am not required to do that. It is my absolute right to take it to the IC. And frankly, these comments were made in public. They were made in a public meeting. They were made at a public school board. They are damaging to the public and to certain segments of the public. And I'm not apologizing for doing it. I regret that Mr. Crawford is feeling challenged by it, or if he's having health concerns related to that. I genuinely do. But that doesn't mean that this was an improper process. In fact, it is entirely not improper. The reality is there are many people harmed here, and not just Mr. Crawford. The people that are harmed are the people listening to the language that is being used, not understanding why the board doesn't get it, why they don't fundamentally understand basic human rights concepts. That's damaging to my reputation, it's damaging to the board, it's not only damaging to Mr. Crawford. Being threatened with reprisal for doing what you think is right is also damaging. This is not unique to Mr. Crawford. We are in a difficult situation. Nobody is asking for anything other than what I would view as a bare minimum in light of the conduct that is reported to have occurred in this report. And I'm going to observe very clearly that Mr. Crawford had the opportunity to engage with the IC in a meaningful way to express his viewpoints and have those reflected in the report, and he chose not to do so. That's not on me, that's not on Trustee Forbes as complainants, that's on Mr. Crawford as a respondent. The situation is upsetting, but it isn't just upsetting to Mr. Crawford. It is upsetting to a community who has had to listen to these comments and carry the weight of them with them for this long. I'm at a bit of a loss because in my mind, this is a straightforward matter. A complaint was filed. Everyone was provided with procedural fairness, which means an opportunity to be heard and to provide your response to the questions or concerns that have been raised. That was provided. So I don't understand exactly what's happening in the context of this meeting, and I'm not going to speak to it again other than to say, I think at some stage this board is going to have to grapple with the idea that the comments we make are not just about free speech. They are about the interests of the communities that we serve, recognizing the diversity of the communities we serve, understanding that the language we use causes harm to the people in the communities that we serve. And for that, I'm absolutely unapologetic about filing it. I'm sorry that it was made necessary. I'm sorry that people feel conflicted. I'm sorry that anybody is in pain. But I'm sorry as much for Mr. Crawford as I am for the communities that we are elected to represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Moving on to student trustee Malcolm.
Are we still discussing the first part of the motion? Because I'd like to make comments towards it. Yeah, okay. So after reading through the LC and the sections, section 1.4 says that trustees will support the visions and values and strategic priorities of the Durham District School Board. And our board is built upon diversity, equity, and student well-being. Meanwhile, as it's shown in front of us, we have a trustee on the board who essentially goes against each of these pillars. And as a student of this board and a person of color, I'm shocked that we're allowing these comments from a trustee that has, one, been on the board for a very long time and understands our values, and two, has undergone training of these topics. So with that, I'm set to believe that Trustee Crawford does not support the board's visions and values, and want to know what the board wants to do about that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I now have Trustee Crawford. You're allowed 2 minutes for the second part here.
Thank you. As to the comment that I did not deal with the IC, I did deal with the IC. My remarks back to them might have been short and succinct, but I did deal with it. And I also sent something out to the other trustees about if I said something in
Trustee
here.
Crawford.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm just speaking
Point of order. Could you stay to the motion, please? Thank you.
This is to the motion.
No,
there seems to be a misunderstanding that the comments that I made during debate on a proposed policy. There's a difference between that and making comments. There was nothing offensive in the comments. They were simply discussions of the wording. And if someone was offended by that, then I'm sorry, but that's what happens during debate. And we should keep in mind that this same thing was debated at another board, and that board made their decision to remove those comments. So I don't think that I should be charged with an offense when I'm debating something during a public debate on a proposed policy. I would say this, though. I would be happy to sit with the other trustees and learn something about the code, and maybe I can learn something from that. I would accept that as even a penalty, that I must take some education on that, and I would take it with my fellow trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. We have a speakers list of student trustee Knowles, then Trustee Barrett, then Trustee Forbes.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. We're a little bit past this now, but I just wanted to give my support to Student Trustee Malcolm's statements. As the current chair of the Equity Working Group in the DDSB Student Senate, when I see the DDSB, I see a very diverse school board, and I have firsthand experience in seeing the diversity and representation throughout the school board. And when I read Trustee Crawford's statements, I found them to be very concerning, and I found that they didn't align with the values of the school board. So I just wanted to give my support to Student Trustee Malcolm's statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Student Trustee Knowles. And Trustee Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Templeton. I have a couple of comments. And I'm not sure where it's going to come up, but they will come up at some point, that I have considerable issues with this entire report as written and the information that's included. I don't think it's a best step forward. I don't think it was well written, and there's elements in here that should not be included. So at some point, I'm going to discuss that, because I believe there's hearsay in here. We've heard it mentioned. We're talking about constituent voices. That's very all well and good, but we should not be introducing information here that isn't backed up. That being able to have some commentary with regards to, well, constituents called me, is not relevant to the investigation. It's about what was said. It's about what was demonstrated at the meeting. I don't disagree, and whereas I'm not necessarily going to be able to side with the commentary that was made with regards to white supremacy, the reality is that this was in committee. This was a discussion. And I'm not going to disagree with Trustee Crawford that our sister board had the same debate and withdrew the statements of white supremacy from their policy. I'm not saying that I agree with that. I'm not saying that I find that acceptable. I'm not saying that I would support being able to withdraw that. But what I am being able to determine today is whether or not these comments were made in context of debate, or whether these comments were made with regards to whether there's a support of the policy. Now that the policy is passed, I would expect that every trustee would, as per the Education Act and as good governance, support every element of the policy as written, and I would expect every trustee to be able to do the same. But I'm having to be able to put this into context of how did this discussion take place, where did it take place, was it a conversation? Was it a support of the policy or a debate of the proposed policy? And I have to be able to put it into that. There are a number of elements within this report that are absolutely incorrect. The investigator, I think, makes commentary that is outside the perspective of the parameters of the document, and I believe seriously misinterprets the role of what trustees are. To be able to suggest that somehow on page 31 that trustees are more limited is absolutely incorrect and is a falsehood that continues to be able to pervade public education. And another thing, we have never enforced the 4-minute rule at any of these meetings, and I would respectfully ask Chair Templeton that what we don't do is limit the debate on what is a very important thing. I think it's really unfortunate that we're doing this with this meeting, but we have not done it in 3.5 years. In fact, we've never done it in the 19 years that I've sat here. That concludes my comments, Chair Templeton.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Next on the speaker list is the Trustee Forbes.
Thank you, Chair. I feel a bit like this was not easy, and I think there's been many things about this process that have not been easy, and this is about not just how I feel, but we are in a public role, publicly elected, and responsible for providing governance to a public school board. And I think it's incredibly important to, I am sorry that this has been hard on Trustee Crawford, and it has been hard on me personally as well. But I did what I felt was right, and I am sorry that we are here, but these are things that we have to take very seriously, and in a very public way, since the comments were made publicly. I really feel this is quite necessary to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. Next on the speaker list is Student Trustee Malcolm. Okay. And we're going to move to Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. So with respect to the 4 minutes, I'm content if others want to extend it. I will observe, however, that our bylaws were recently changed and we haven't had a situation where a 4-minute speech was a problem. Nonetheless, I also recognize that for Trustee Crawford, this is an important issue. For all of us, it's an important issue, but there's an individual element to it that he's experiencing that is not the same for most of us, with the exception perhaps of Trustee Forbes and myself. And so if it's the will of the board to extend that, I certainly am not going to object to that. I don't think it matters where these comments are made, though. I don't think it matters if they're made in a committee meeting or at a board meeting. They're all public meetings of this board. So they might be differently constituted, but they are all public meetings where the public is engaged and listening and hearing these discussions. And the idea that whether it's in this kind of meeting or that kind of meeting is relevant in my mind is really a red herring. The question isn't about where it was made. The question is, what were the comments? What impact did they have? And did they breach the code? Those are the questions. That's it. It's not about all of these things that are kind of in the weeds, frankly. It's a really simple question. I recognize the seriousness of the matter isn't lessened by that, but the question is not difficult. It is a straightforward question. Do these comments constitute a breach of the code? There was a fact finding. Whether I recognize it's our responsibility to determine whether they breached the code. But whether they occurred or how they occurred and the impact of that is in the report. And it is incumbent on us, I think, to rely on the factual findings in there, not on the determination about what to do. That's appropriately in our purview. But in terms of we've handed this issue to the IC, as was our right pursuant to our own bylaws and code, and in accordance with the Ed Act, which makes that permissible. Having done so, absent some kind of breach of procedural fairness or natural justice in the report, my view is it is appropriate to rely on the factual determinations in the report, and it is my intention to do so. I do want to observe, though, that this process is difficult, and it's not difficult for one person, it is difficult for all involved. I don't know, I will not speak for another trustee, I will not speak for Trustee Forbes, but I know that I have certainly felt attacked repeatedly over this issue. I feel attacked for doing what I think is right, and I've had enough of it, frankly, and I'm not tolerating it anymore, and I would ask that if everyone has spoken, we move to a vote.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. I believe everybody has spoken to it. I just
see
wanted
Trustee
to
Crawford. Sorry, Chair Templeton. I see Trustee Crawford does have his hand up. And in terms of the time limit, you might. It doesn't appear that there's any objection. You might just confirm that, but certainly Trustee Crawford would be appropriate if there's no objection to allow more time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in fact, one of the things I was going to make a point of order is that we can very easily go into a committee mode, which would allow more discussion. We just simply need to do it if there's no objection. I don't mean committee of the whole in camera. We can go into a committee mode that would allow more freer discussion on this if there was no objection. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I was actually just going to mention what Robert mentioned as well. If it's the will of the board, we'll remove the limitation on speaking and move forward in that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Trustee Crawford, I was just going to mention that what you're asking isn't in connection with the motion that is on the floor.
Yes, it is. But my other part is in connection. The suggestion about committee was separate, but I think you've ruled on that, and we have a little more freedom to speak. So here's what my concerns are in a nutshell, because I've been working on this for months, and what we should have.
I have a point of order.
Sorry, hold on a second. I just reading my chat. Trustee Lundquist has a objection to what's happening on the floor right now.
I may not have an objection. I have a significant degree of confusion over what is happening right now. So my understanding was that Trustee Crawford indicated we could move into committee barring objection. I object to that, and I'm not prepared to do that. There was a motion to bring us here today into a public forum to discuss public commentary, and I'm not prepared to move this outside of that. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, that simply means we can take a vote on it then. If there's an objection, we can take a vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Whether or not we.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. I do have one more speaker, if everybody's allowed. It's Student Trustee Malcolm, and after this speaker, everybody has had a chance to speak. I would like to move into a vote on the motion.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just want to go back to what Trustee Lundquist was saying earlier about how everything we say in our public board meetings does go back, obviously, to the public and can affect them more than can affect us. And going back to what Trustee Crawford was saying at our October meeting, for example, how white supremacy is reverse racism, how it's insulting to white people, I think could definitely go back to the public and affect more than just us. It can be harmful towards students, towards our community, towards the parents in our community, and I think that he should just think about that when we go through these motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Malcolm. Sorry, could you, thank you. We're going to call the motion now. The motion reads, as a result of comments that he made on October 25th, 2021 Governance Committee meeting, the text of which is set out on page 17, Speaker of the IC report, Trustee Crawford breached the code of conduct, in particular with sections 1.4 and 6.9. I believe the board is set up with the green and red check marks and online.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Chair Templeton. Two things. There's a bit of a typo in the motion. So I think when speakers list was being typed into the chat, speaker inadvertently got into the motion. So we're just correcting what's on the screen right now. And then I believe there was a motion for a recorded vote. And did that need to be seconded and voted upon, or is that an automatic? It's automatic. Okay. So I believe when you're ready, Chair Templeton, the recording secretary will assist in terms of the calling for the recorded vote.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to call the vote.
So just
correction, are we calling a vote on 1 and 2, which are virtually the same, or are we just calling the vote on 1?
We are just calling the vote on item 1, first motion.
And is it true that I can't vote?
That is correct, Trustee Crawford.
And just for the record, could we place that into the minutes as to what item was being used to keep me from voting?
Could I have clarification on that, Council Cotter?
Yes, it is section 218.3, sub 12 of the Education Act.
And that will be placed in the minutes. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, should I begin with the vote?
Yes, please begin with the vote.
Trustee Barrett,
Meaning,
Trustee Byrd,
Yes. Favor.
Trustee Brainy, Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
Trustee Forbes,
In favor?
Trustee Lowry, Trustee Lundquist,
Yes.
Trustee Morton. Okay. Trustee Templeton,
Yes.
Trustee Thatcher. No? We have 6 in favor, 2 absent, and 2 abstain.
The motion passes. I'd like to move on to the second motion, which is almost identical to the first motion. So if we want to talk on it, we can talk on it, or we can go to a recorded vote immediately. My suggestion is going to a recorded vote immediately on this motion, since it is close to the first one. Trustee Crawford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Even though it does seem to be the same, and I had originally suggested that they be voted on together, my concern with these is that the sections 1.4 and 6.9 are speaking to policies that would be in effect, that we are expected to govern ourselves by. Again, these remarks took place during the debate on a proposed policy, and that proposed policy had many changes and amendments to it. My remarks were put in there because I had received from my constituents concerns about the wording, and I too had concerns about the wording. I had also stated in my comments that I was 90 to 92% in favor of the policy, and that my concerns were restricted to that wording, and I had asked at that time that they be amended, and they were not. And again, and this is very important, there were several remedies to what I had said during that, none of which were taken, and taking it directly to the IC passed by those remedies, which would have been very helpful to the participants. And this would have been resolved in a matter of weeks instead of me going through this and others for 6 months. And I think we also have to consider This is very costly in more ways than one. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford. Seeing no hands for questions, I would like to, sorry,
Trust,
my mistake. Trustee Lundquist. Oh, okay. I would like to put the motion to a vote, and it's already been required. No. Trustee Barrett.
Yeah, sorry, and I may be preempting Trustee Lundquist, but I'm going to actually reiterate what Trustee Lundquist had said earlier, because I fully support it. The process by which and the methodology by which a complaint is filed is certainly at the hands of the individuals who want to file the complaint. I can appreciate Trustee Crawford's desire to be able to deal with it in a different way. However, it is quite clear from the policy of the rights of the individuals who file the complaint on the methodology by which, and there is no onus of responsibility on those individuals to be able to determine a different way or a different methodology on being able to deal with the complaint. So I can appreciate Trustee Crawford's viewpoint, but the reality is the legality and probably even the moral legality is certainly in the hands of both the individuals who filed the complaints and their right in order to be able to have it dealt with in the manner which they saw fit. And I fully support the concept that in public, done in public, deliberated in public. I think there are too many school boards actually across the province that deal with these issues in private and should not deal with them in private. Although I know, and I think Councillor Cotter would say this is one of those elements that you can deal with it in both manners, but I would fully support that as well. So just, it's probably where Trustee Lundquist was going to go, but I will fully support that concept. It's really up to the individuals to determine the methodology and how they want the complaint dealt with.
And if I may, I didn't want anyone to think.
One second, Trustee Crawford.
It's a point of order.
Oh, okay.
I'm just speaking to that. I do agree that a person can take the complaint directly to the IC. I'm not saying that...
Point of order. Sharing your opinion that is different doesn't make it a point of order.
Well, you did not
improper.
Interrupt. Excuse me.
Sorry, can I have
You did not interrupt
Trustee
comments.
Crawford. Trustee Crawford, can I hold for 1 second, please? We're addressing everybody. Can we go through the chair? I'm going to get some clarification here. I already called the question, and we called for a recorded vote. I did miss Trustee Barrett's hand. It is hard to see here unless I get a message, and I moved to him. So what I wanted to do is go back and call the vote now, as Trustee Crawford, you've already spoken to the motion, and it looks like we're ready to move on to a recorded vote on the second motion. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'll continue with the second vote. Trustee Barrett,
Abstention.
Trustee Byrd,
Yes.
Trustee Brainy, Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
Trustee Forbes,
yes.
Trustee Lowry, Trustee Lundquist,
Yes.
Trustee Morton, Trustee Templeton,
Yes.
Trustee Thatcher. We have 6 yes, 2 absent, and 2 abstain.
That motion passes. I'd like to move on to the third motion, which is, as a result of threats of reprisal against the trustees that filed complaints against him, Trustee Crawford breached the code of conduct, in particular section 6.53.
Through you, Chair, I'll proceed with the voting.
Oh, one second, please. Trustee Crawford has a comment. I haven't called a vote on the third motion yet. Trustee Crawford, go ahead, please.
Yes, well, these are being handled separately, so this one could be debated. And this, to me, is the single most important part. This one, there was no formal complaint against me saying that I made any threats. This was the result of the development by the IC that, in his opinion, but if anyone who looks up the word threat will see that it's highly inappropriate to be using it in this context. And I'm so opposed to that if this was passed and people would agree that I had made threats when they can read what I said, it would be highly inappropriate. So I did have some questions of the chair, and I hope people don't take this as a warning or a threat, but I think it needs to be understood. In a situation where I would be unhappy with the results, I would be allowed to take that to judicial review. Is that correct?
Councilor Clark, can I get clarification on that?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's for the chair to provide that type of advice to
I have to ask
Trustee
through
Crawford.
the chair, yes.
Pardon me?
I'm asking through the chair.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think me or the chair or anyone here would provide legal advice to you in terms of what options might be if you're dissatisfied with the result.
Well, is it not part of the code?
The code, I believe, in the does deal with potential costs. Let me just pull it up for a minute. Hang on.
Well, that's exactly what I'm asking. I need to know this, and I think other people need to know it, that something as serious as this can turn into a much longer process with greater costs, and I need to know that as well. So could this be subject to judicial review?
Trustee Carter is looking up that information right now. Trustee Crawford, please hold.
And while he's looking up the next, it's part of the same item, someone asking for judicial review could be given the amount of $20,000 to assist with costs for that review.
So through you, Chair Templeton, the Section 4.7 of the code does contemplate the judicial review and spells out the costs and potential reimbursement.
Okay. And if I may too, could the chair or someone read the legal definition of threat?
Councilor Carter, do you have a definition of threat? I don't believe we need to look this up, but a threat.
Well, then
I
have one if you need it.
But
point of order, are we not dealing with the language that it, or point of clarification information, I'm sorry, are we not dealing with the language in the code?
we are dealing with the language in the code, which means as it stands right now, we're not here to be Webster's dictionaries or anything like that. Anybody can look up the definition of the word threat, and I'm going to move on to our next speaker. I'd like to thank Trustee Crawford for his words. We will come back to you, but I have a speaker list. Darlene, Trustee Forbes, you're up now.
Okay. So I did receive an email from Trustee Crawford, which I did not reply to because it was clear that he was saying that he returned my complaint and, he would, if necessary, if I didn't withdraw it, he would launch a code of conduct complaint against myself. That is a threat. That is intimidation. I felt intimidated that if I did not withdraw my complaint, I would end up embroiled in a code of conduct complaint from Trustee Crawford. And that to me is a threat, and it is an attempt at intimidation. And that is clear from the language of the email.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. I received, I don't know if it's the exact same email, but certainly an email indicating that if I did not withdraw my complaint, that Trustee Crawford indicated he would file a complaint against me. That was provided to the IC, and I'm just going to state for the record that what a reprisal is very clear in law. A reprisal is an action or a threat that is intended as retaliation for claiming or enforcing a right. That's exactly what happened. We were threatened with complaints being lodged against us if we didn't do what Trustee Crawford wanted. I can't actually think of a more textbook definition, frankly, of a threat of reprisal. And so I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm just going to observe that it fits squarely within the parameters of our code and the understanding of threats of reprisal in human rights legislation and in, frankly, every other piece of legislation I've ever read.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. Trustee Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Just commentary is the tenet, the basic foundation of any process, whether it's provincial policies or whether it's Canadian policies or individual company policies or board policies. A basic tenet is to be able to ensure that when a complaint is made, that there are indeed no reprisals and no implied concept of threat or an element of being able to somehow discourage somebody from being able to raise a complaint or a concern. It is a fundamental of how processes work. And in this case, although it may be difficult in order to be able to read a complaint, it still does not absolve anybody from that basic foundation and tenet of being not to have to be fearful of making or in raising a concern. And so whether implied or whether potentially even in a hint, it is just totally unacceptable. And in this case, I find that the email that was written could be taken in no other way by the two individuals as a threat to be able to potentially withdraw their concerns. And whether written in error or whatever the case may be, it is unacceptable and violates all of the principles of being able to have a process that works for the rights of a minority to be able to raise a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Seeing no more questions, I would like to call a vote on a recorded vote on motion number 3. As a result of threats of reprisal against trustees that filed complaints against him, Trustee Crawford breached the code of conduct, in particular section 653. A recorded vote was asked or requested.
Through you, Chair, I'll go ahead with the vote. Michael Barrett,
Yes.
sorry, Trustee Barrett.
Yes.
Trustee Byrd,
Yes.
Trustee Brainy,
Yes.
Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
Trustee Forbes,
Yes.
Trustee Lowry,
Yes.
Trustee Lundquist,
Yes.
Trustee Morton, Trustee Templeton,
Yes.
Trustee Thatcher, eight were in favor of the vote, and two were absent.
That motion passes. And I'd like to move to, or ask Council Cotter to explain what our options are at this point. I know the Integrity Commissioner suggested censoring, but I believe we need to know all options on the table.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Templeton. So, under the Education Act, Section 218.3, subsection 3, if the board determines that a member has breached the board's code of conduct, the board may impose one or more of the following sanctions. 1, censure the member. 2, barring the member from attending all or part of a meeting of the board or a meeting of a committee of the board. 3, barring the member from sitting on one or more committees of the board for the period of time specified by the board.
Thank you, Councilor Cotter. We can discuss the matter now, and I do have a speaker, Darlene Forbes.
Thank you. I just, because we did have a code of conduct investigation earlier on with a trustee who is no longer with the board, and I just want to make sure, through you, Chair Thatcher, that there's also an option to do nothing. So these are the three possibilities if we wish to do something, but there is also an option to do nothing. I'm not suggesting that is appropriate in this case. I just want to make sure that everyone who is at the table is aware of that, and that's a correct interpretation on my part.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. I'd like to open the floor for discussion from trustees.
Oh, could we just, sorry,
Sorry,
Mr. Chair, I just would like to, that was a ramble, I apologize. I just would like to confirm with Council Cotter if that's okay through you.
Yep, that's Council Cotter.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Templeton. So, Trustee Forbes, your memory is correct. I think that was the discussion we had last time, that it may be available to the board to do nothing, but there was some discussion about that, and ultimately it didn't become a ripe issue because the board did censure the member. And I'm not aware off the top of my head of any cases where a school board has found a member to be in breach and not taken some sanction.
Thank you, Council Cotter. So I'd like to open the floor now to discussion regarding the three options that we have: the censure of the trustee, barring the trustee from attending all or part of meetings of the board or a meeting of committee of the board, barring the member from sitting on one or more committees of the board for the period of time specified by the board, or we do nothing. The floor is open for discussion. And I see no discussion.
Trustee Lundquist has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. My mistake. Here it is. Sorry. Trustee Lundquist, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm going to note that at page 40 of the report, the IC makes a recommendation for censure. And I recognize that it is not dispositive, but it's certainly persuasive to me. So censure is, like, frankly, merely just an expression of formal disapproval. And in light of what the findings are today, I don't know how we don't go down that road. And so I'm supporting the imposition of censure for the members' comments, my apologies, and for, in particular, the threats of reprisal. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist.
Trustee Barrett's hand is up, Chair Templeton.
Oh, Trustee Barrett?
Because I know Scott's not pushing the button from home. I know that. So I would, through you, Chair Templeton, certainly concur with regards to...
I am back.
Chair Templeton, I would concur with at a minimum, censure with regards to Trustee Crawford. I would, however, suggest and build upon some comments that Trustee Crawford also made, and I understand that it's not within the three areas of what is regulated by the Education Act and by our policy. However, I believe that there was a willingness on Trustee Crawford's commentary that he made earlier with regards to any specific training, et cetera, that would need to take place. And although it may be out of the purview of the board to be able to mandate that, I would suggest that we maybe take up on that offer on being able to ensure that there is potentially one-on-one training, and I would potentially direct it through the chair of the board in order to be able to have some one-on-one meetings with Trustee Crawford with regards to the sensitivity, equity, diversity, and inclusion, et cetera. So I understand it's beyond the realm, but if there's a willingness on both sides, that I think that would also be appropriate and show good faith to not only the board but to the public, in the sense that there's an element of being able to step forward in unity with the board as well. So I would put that on the table as well.
Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Are there any more comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may, my system went down again at a very inappropriate time. Has the vote been taken?
Yes, the vote was taken.
My concerns were, and I was hoping that people would look up the definition of threat. There is no way.
Trustee.
Well, I think what I'll.
We've already spoken on this, and
well, I did not get a chance to. I did not get a chance to speak on something, on the most important part of this. However, if that's what you're ruling, I will send out a copy to the trustees and to the press, if they're listening and they want it, a copy, an exact worded copy of what I had given to the complainants and to the IC. And I also wanted to complain on procedure that the IC is the one that introduced that formal complaint. It didn't come from a board person, and it wasn't from a trustee. So procedurally, it was done incorrectly.
Point of order, Trustee Crawford. We had this all clarified earlier.
So
we
if
had
I
it
could,
all clarified, but I'm trying to defend myself.
well, if I could, Chair,
And it is a public meeting.
if I could,
Trustee
Chair
Crawford,
Templeton.
one moment, please. Trustee or Councillor Cotter.
So I just wanted to remind Trustee Crawford and the others that he will have a chance to make written submissions under the provisions of the Education Act. Following this meeting, he will receive written notice of the findings, and he'll have an opportunity to provide written submissions to the board. And if he does so, the board will reconsider the findings in accordance with the provisions of the Education Act.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cotter. I do realize I'll get to do that. It's just, to me, it's going to be a little difficult to convince people who have already found me guilty that I am not. And this would have been the time for me to put that information forward. But I will do it. And I had asked about the procedures for the $20,000 and for me to be able to take that to judicial review. And I would like to have something from the board on that and what my rights are on that. Thank you. And I guess I can't say much more, but if anyone wants any information from me, they can ask and I will send it, because I've kept a record of every transaction during this process that is 6 months long. So any information that anybody wants, they can ask me and I will send it out to them, and that would include the media. Thank you. So I guess I'm done for the day. I wish the process had been a little fairer.
We have a point of order on the floor.
Actually,
Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, I
point of
sent
order,
me- yeah.
Dory,
I'm sorry.
Can you turn the mic on for the point of order, please?
Sorry. So I would like some clarification from council. I have a point of order. I don't think it's appropriate for a trustee involved in this to start individually sending things to other trustees. There has been a process engaged, and I would like some clarification on the appropriateness of this, because in the world in which I operate, this would be grossly improper.
Point of order.
Through you, Chair Templeton.
Somebody interrupted
Trustee-
me to bring forward a point of order, which is just an opinion. I also have a point
Trustee
of order.
Crawford, Trustee Lundquist has the floor, and she's asked a question of Councillor Cotter, and we're just going to get some clarification.
So the process for providing written submissions will be that following this meeting, we will send out a written notice to Trustee Crawford. He could then make written submissions back to the board through the chair of the board. And that's the process that should be followed. That is what's laid out in the Education Act, and this is a public meeting, and the discussion should be public. There should be no side discussions initiated by Trustee Crawford, in my opinion.
And my point of order was that I was making that and accepting it when the point of order interrupted me, and there is certainly nothing wrong with me inviting people to seek information from me. That is my right.
Respectfully, Mr.
The right
Chair.
of defense.
Thank you, Trustee Crawford.
supersedes others' opinions, especially when that opinion is coming from a complainant who got the right to vote.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm not expressing an opinion. I inquired because my understanding is that decision makers need to have the same material in front of them. Every decision maker needs to have the same material in front of them. It can't be piecemeal. It can't be that some people are sitting at a table with different pieces of information, because you can never come to a consensus or a reasoned decision on that basis. It isn't my expression of anything other than that. Everybody needs the same information. There's a process in the Ed Act. That's the process we are required to follow. And in my view, what Trustee Crawford has suggested would actually be outside of the parameters of that process. Thank you.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. That particular point of order just expressed was an opinion. It's not a point of order. I can put information in front of people that will help me in my defense. So she can argue those things all she wants.
Trustee Crawford,
but my point of order is
sorry,
that
Trustee
I can
Crawford.
ask people.
Trustee Crawford, I'm going to ask you to eliminate your, just not speak at this point. I need
Thank you, Mr.
clarification.
Chair. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Councillor Cotter and ask him what my next direction is. I believe my next direction would be asking for a motion to be put on the table regarding one of the suggestions, or four of the suggestions actually. We do nothing. Censure of the trustee, barring the trustee from attending all or part of the meeting of the board or meeting, barring the member from sitting on one or more committees of the board for a period of time specified by the board. What I'm looking for clarification for is, how do we proceed from here?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Chair Templeton. So I would request that a motion be put on the floor. There was some discussion, I think, as to what trustees' views were as to what would be appropriate, but I think, yeah, having the motion put on the floor and seconded would be appropriate. And I would suggest we deal just with the consequences under the Section 218.3, and then if there's a desire for a subsequent motion on the training piece, I think I suggest we deal with that separately.
Okay, what I'm looking for is anyone have a motion they would like to put on the floor for discussion?
Chair Templeton, Trustee Brainey's hand is up.
Trustee Brady?
Thank you, Chair Templeton. I would, at this time, move the motion to put the censure on the table to go forward and have that voted on.
Do trustees require a written screen at this point?
Yes, please, if we can see it. I'd like to do this proper and have everything recorded.
Thank you. So, Trustee Brainey, do you mind repeating the motion?
The motion that I'm putting on the table is a motion to censure Trustee Crawford.
Thank you, Trustee Brady. Can I get a seconder for the motion once we get it up on the board?
Just 1 second, Chair Templeton, before we get this up on the screen.
Thank you.
I just want to say the job of staff is just to record the motion as said, and then if there are amendments, that would have to come through a trustee voice. Council Cotter, if there's advice to the motion maker, you could do so.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Templeton. I was assuming it was implicit, Trustee Brainey, but I was just going to suggest that we add in relation to the breaches that the board has determined, breaches of the code of conduct determined by the board, just so we make sure that it's in relation to all three breaches.
Accept that, Trustee Crawford, or sorry, Council Cotter.
Okay, we'll put that motion up. Thank you.
Could I get a seconder for that motion, please? I can read the motion out. Motion that Trustee Crawford be censured in relation of the breaches of the code of conduct as determined by the board. Moved by Trustee Brady, and I'm looking for a seconder.
I would second that. Trustee Forbes.
Seconded by Darlene Forbes. And do we have a speakers list to speak on this motion? Seeing none, I would like to get a recorded vote on the motion. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. I'm going to proceed with the calling of the voting for Trustee Barrett,
Yes.
Trustee Byrd,
Yes.
Trustee Brainey,
Yes.
Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
Trustee Forbes,
Yes.
Trustee Lowry,
Yes.
Trustee Lundquist,
Yes.
Trustee Morton, Trustee Templeton,
Yes.
and Trustee Thatcher. Eight have voted in favor of the motion, 2 are absent.
The motion does pass. That brings us to the end. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by trustee Lundquist. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
No.
Oh. Sorry.
Sorry, Chair Templeton, I did want to reintroduce the concept, and I understand it's outside of the parameters of the Education Act with
Yes.
regards to the potential of being able to, so I'll make a motion. I'm going to make this on the fly, Mr. Surjanic, so I'll speak slower than normal. That it be moved that the Durham District School Board request that Trustee Paul Crawford enter into equity, diversity, and inclusion training, or let's say one-on-one equity, diversity, and inclusion training at the I was going to say instruction of the chair, or under, I was going to say under the influence of the chair, that doesn't work either, at the direction of the chair of the board. Recognizing that this is a request and would have to be agreed to by Trustee Crawford. Is that okay, Mr. Surjanic? Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Barrett. Sorry about that. I missed your hand. So the motion has been brought forward by trustee Barrett that it be moved that the Durham District School Board request trustee Crawford enter into a one-on-one equity, diversity, inclusion training at the direction of the chair of the board, recognizing that is a request and would need to be agreed by trustee Crawford. We have a mover of trustee Barrett, trustee Lundquist.
Yes, I would be pleased to second that motion, and I would like to speak to it once that's available.
Seconded by trustee Lundquist, and we'll open the floor to discussion, and we'll start with trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. I'm going to observe that these are challenging processes for everybody, and particularly complainants and respondents. And I also want to observe that they're not meant to be punitive. They're meant to be opportunities for doing better and for learning and for going forward and building a culture at the board table and in the board that actually supports the dignity of every person that comes into contact with us. And so I recognize that this motion is really a recommendation, but it's an important one because I believe that the only path forward through these kinds of matters is through a willingness to learn. We're all not in the same phase of a learning journey, and we may never be, but the opportunity to engage is one that engage on issues that one finds challenging is the exact kind of opportunity we encourage in the students in this board to open their minds and their hearts to things that are difficult sometimes. And so I recognize that this is one-on-one training, and I'm just going to say that I am prepared to actually undertake this training myself. I think that in the spirit of reconciliation, we have a choice here, and that is we have a member of this board who has had a difficult time. And, I'm confident that some will say because of something I've done, and I'm okay with that because I actually view this as an opportunity to do better and to support Trustee Crawford in this stage of learning. And so if that's something that will be offered to the rest of us, I would be pleased to accept that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Lundquist. And actually, I believe that is a good idea. Do we have any more speakers? If not, I'd like to have a vote on trustee Barrett. Did you want a recorded vote or did you just a vote on the motion?
Vote.
Okay, well, we'll have a vote on the motion. Those at the board meeting, please hold up your green or red X, and online, please use your reactions. And if somebody could tell me what we have online, because I can't see anything, could I get a count, please?
Chair Templeton, there are 5 in favor in person.
Okay.
So in addition to those that have voted online, I think you're at 8 in favor.
And we are in favor, 8 in favor. That motion passes. And could I get a motion to adjourn, please? I don't. Trustee Forbes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for their time and patience. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.